from Brazil or Argentina? Argentina.
Initiatives. That's nice. Yeah.
Testing.
Hello. Hello. Hello, everyone. Hi, everyone. I hope you can hear me. I cannot hear anybody. There we go.
Wendy,
Yes, I can.
how are you?
Hi. Good to see you. Hi, everyone.
It's been forever.
Yep, long time.
Thanks
Perfect.
for doing this.
Yeah, very happy.
So we will, there'll be some folks joining us in person. I'll kick it off in a sec. There'll be folks obviously on Zoom. I see we have a few, and then we stream on LinkedIn. So we'll have some folks there. So
Okay, that sounds great.
a little bit of a village. And you're doing well. Are you in the office at the bank?
Yes, you can tell by my very boring background.
Nice. How's your family?
Everybody's good. Everybody's good. Max is good. And my son went to college this year. My daughters are sophomores. So
Where's your son in school?
he's at Hobart,
Cool.
in upstate New York.
Awesome. I'll tell Max to say hi.
Yes, yes. So everybody's doing well. Thanks for asking.
Great. Okay. So we will just give you in 1 sec. We'll start as soon as Megan starts our stream. Yes. No, waiting. Okay, 1 second. Okay. We're good? Yeah. Okay. So good morning, everyone. Welcome to our Case Western Reserve University Entrepreneurship Speaker Series. My name is Michael Goldberg. I'm our Executive Director of the Veale Institute and a professor at Weatherhead. It's a great pleasure to welcome, when I say an old friend, that doesn't mean that we're old. It just means that we've known each other for a long time. But Wendy Teleki and I met as grad students at Wharton and at Johns Hopkins School of Advanced International Studies a few years ago, and I've always enjoyed, sort of admired from close up and now afar her career at the World Bank, her support of entrepreneurs broadly in the developing world, and more specifically female entrepreneurs, and was thrilled to see her book come out this year. And given our interest on our campus in social entrepreneurship, broadly speaking, and thought it would be great to have you today. So great to have you. All of our sessions that we do are moderated by students. So Erin is here today as a first-year MBA student who will sort of run the show. If you're on Zoom, just let us know if you have a question just by either raising your hand or putting it in the chat. And if you're watching on LinkedIn, via our live stream, just put your question in the comments and then we can make sure we feed it to Erin. So Wendy, welcome. And Erin, I will turn it over to you.
Thank you, Michael. And thank you, Wendy, for joining us today. Wendy is the head of WIFI Secretariat, housed at the World Bank. And she's also the co-author of the book Rebalance, How Women Lead, Parent, Partner, and Thrive. And that just came out recently. So Wendy, I was hoping you could just start off by telling us a little bit about your role at the World Bank and just give us a little background on WIFI.
Okay, great. Absolutely. So hi, everyone. It's really great to be talking to all of you here, and to Michael for the introduction and the invitation. We've had kind of these nice parallel paths watching each other from afar, and it's good to finally connect. So I have spent most of my career working in the World Bank Group before I went to SAIS and Wharton, where I met Michael, and after as well. Mainly, though, in the International Finance Corporation, which is the private sector arm of the World Bank, and is basically like an investment bank for developing countries, focused on kind of development impact investing. And I've primarily worked in the SME side, working on small businesses, small business finance, capacity building for entrepreneurs generally, and working a lot with financial sector institutions. So trying to get financial instruments out to women entrepreneurs and help the banks and other institutions improve their product offerings for entrepreneurs. And about 5 years ago, I was asked to work at IFC on a program called the Women Entrepreneurs Finance Initiative, where I spent about a year developing a program in IFC to utilize WeFi funding. And about a year later, I was asked to move over to the World Bank to run the broader Secretariat on WeFi. And I'll explain a little bit about what WeFi is and how it's structured. And then we can talk a little bit about the programming if you want to learn more about what we're doing to support women entrepreneurs. So WeFi was created 5 years ago as an initiative of the G20, and it aims to support women entrepreneurs in developing countries around the world. And it does that by providing funding for access to finance, to work on building capacity and get money out the door for financing, and working with financial institutions, access to markets. We work with corporations, we work with governments on their procurement policies, we work with e-commerce sites to try to get more women to have access to those marketplaces. We work on issues related to policy and the enabling environment for women entrepreneurs, so and training and capacity building. So working on mentoring, training, capacity building, those kinds of things for women entrepreneurs. The way we do this is our donors, we have 14 government donors. They gave us $350 million 5 years ago. And every year we allocate money to our 7 implementing partners. And those implementing partners are all of the big multilateral development banks. So in addition to funding the World Bank's work essentially with governments to support women entrepreneurs, we fund IFC's work with the private sector, so working mainly with financial institutions to support women entrepreneurs. We give money also to the African Development Bank, the Asian Development Bank, the European Bank for Reconstruction and Development, the Inter-American Development Bank, and the Islamic Development Bank. So all of those institutions every year are able to apply for money from us, and they deploy our money in about 60 countries so far. So we have activities now in 60 countries across these different partners, and they're working with about 250 different institutions in those countries to develop new products and services for women entrepreneurs. So, many of those are banks, they're venture capital funds, they're accelerators, incubators, they're e-commerce companies, they're corporations looking to diversify their value chains, they're governments working on policy issues, and a number of other things. So these funds are deployed, actively with new projects rolling out like literally every day to support women entrepreneurs. That's basically my job, is to manage the flow of funds from our donors and then figure out how to best allocate those funds across the different multilateral development banks, and what are the key themes we want them to focus on in the calls each year. So we've had themes on the enabling ecosystem, which is more of like the early stage startup ecosystem. We've had calls on value chains, so working more on the corporate side and e-commerce and marketplace side, on technology, especially during COVID. We did a lot on technology because so many institutions had to pivot and rethink how they served women entrepreneurs. And going forward, we're going to do more on climate, so climate entrepreneurs, and entrepreneurs in the care economy, trying to get more women who are in businesses that are supporting the care economy, so childcare, elder care, education, healthcare, more women to really lead in those businesses going forward. So that's my job.
Great, well, thank you. And kind of bouncing off of that, Wendy, what project or initiative are you most excited about for the new year here?
Yeah, so maybe I'll give you a couple of examples of the types of projects that we're doing and where we're going forward. So I was just on the call because we're doing something with IFC and a partner in the Middle East that's called She Wins Arabia. That basically is, incubating a broad range of women entrepreneurs in the region and, doing pitch competitions and working with them to accelerate their businesses. And we're growing that so that that'll be, a bigger platform for us to work through, especially in the MENA region, the Middle East region, to do more with them. In other cases, we have like bonds that we've done with banks to get them not just capital from WeFi, but really significantly more capital that ultimately can come in from, general capital markets resources. So that's kind of a really nice innovative program that we're developing. And then we have like digital mentoring programs that we're rolling out through Central Asia, through the EBRD. So there's a lot of different, pretty innovative projects that are happening. And as I mentioned, we have 3 things we're focused on for the coming in our new 5-year term. We just got an extension for a new 5 years. The first is we want to do more with women entrepreneurs in the climate space. And we basically think of that in 2 ways. One is, how do we help women entrepreneurs build resilience in the face of climate challenges? And many women, are in businesses or in economies where they really need to dramatically transform how they work or how they, insure themselves from disaster or catastrophe. And so making sure they have the financing and the resources and the skills to do that. But more importantly, we're asking the question, in 10 years, when we look at the green economy and the transformation to the green economy, are there going to be women leaders in industry, in these new industries that are being built? And what can we as WeFi do in developing countries to help make sure that the women entrepreneurs with the strong ideas and with the capabilities can grow and they have the equal opportunity to grow as men? So we know, for example, that women entrepreneurs that go through incubation programs are less likely to get financing coming out of the incubation programs than men. They're as likely to get debt, but they're very unlikely to get equity coming out of those programs. So we want to change that dynamic. We're providing incentives to incubators to do more of that, and to make sure that they're not just bringing women into their pipelines, but when they come out of their pipeline, they actually have more equity financing. So doing that in the climate space is something that we're looking to do in the coming year. Likewise, I mentioned the care economy, seeing what we can do to really help women entrepreneurs in the care economy, because it's a need both from a profitability perspective to make sure these women are excelling, but also the women entrepreneurs need better care services themselves. So it's a virtuous circle, trying to help those women do well. And we know in the care industry, most of the employees are women, but of course, what you see is as you get a higher and higher up in management into the leadership and the ownership of these firms, the numbers of women really decline. So we want to see, women in proportion to their share of the labor population in those groups also owning, running, and leading businesses. And then the final thing that we're doing is we're doing a major program with financial institutions around the world to get them to better focus on women entrepreneurs, to have people inside of their organization championing women entrepreneurs, to track the data on how much financing is going to women entrepreneurs, which is happens in very, very few cases with financial institutions, surprisingly. And then also to take actions and put more financing out to women entrepreneurs. So big, what we call a systemic change effort related to leadership data and action on financial access.
Great. Sounds like you have a lot of exciting things coming up for the next 5 years here. If anyone else has any questions regarding WeFi, just feel free to put that in the chat. But switching gears a little bit here, The title of today's discussion is the title of the book that you just co-authored, Rebalance: How Women Lead, Parent, Partner, and Thrive. I was wondering if you could kind of just give us your inspiration on writing a novel.
Yeah, sure. It's not a novel. It's a nonfiction book, but I have been in my career at IFC, or my career at Lucky.
Okay. We're good.
Background
Sorry.
music. I don't know if you guys hear that, but I had a little bit of background music.
Good, how are you?
Oh,
Somebody.
Are we
Okay, I
okay?
think we're good. I think we're good.
Okay. So about 15 years ago now, or yeah, probably 15 years ago now, I got together with a few friends and we decided, we all had very young children, and we all had careers that we were very dedicated to and passionate about. And we were trying to kind of find that right balance for our lives. And so we formed a group that we called Thrive, that was a group of like-minded women who all had young children, all had very demanding careers in social impact areas that we were very passionate about, and wanted to pursue and make sure we could have an impact through our careers in this work. And the group got together every month before COVID to talk about our challenges in what we called like a 360 way. Like, how does the family situation impact on work, and work impact on family, and how do we save time and energy for ourselves? And, really be a network to support each other, to get advice that crossed the boundaries. So it wasn't just a working mentorship or a working relationship or a family, friends kind of thing, but really looking at all of us holistically with our goals as, good parents, good spouses, good workers, and good leaders. And so we had these meetings, and we would sometimes go out, do our own like little mini retreats where we get together for a half a day or even an overnight. And when one of the co-founders was thinking that she wanted to write down the lessons we had learned in that decade of the early formative years of our children's lives. And for many of us, kind of some formative times for our careers in terms of promotions and whatnot. And so I had no time to do it. So I originally told her not on my bucket list to write a book. But then COVID hit, and suddenly we had a lot of time, or I had a lot of time. I have teenagers. So anybody who has teenagers knows, they don't really want to spend that much time with you. And suddenly we were in the house like nonstop together. So we carved out our Saturday mornings through COVID, and we'd either get together to walk and talk about the book, or we actually would do a lot of video calls because one of my co-authors moved to Florida in the middle of this. And so we just kind of talked and tried to extract what the insights were for us during that time that might be helpful for other people coming along, or for people who just want to commiserate with others who have, kind of been through a lot of challenges and found some ways to find success balancing these different elements of our lives.
Great, thank you. I'd love to just open it up and give anyone a chance who has a question to ask away.
I'll ask something.
And introduce yourself, please.
Yeah.
When you ask a question, introduce yourself, please.
Sure. I'm sending a link for somebody. Okay. My name is Megan. I'm the marketing person here for the Veale Institute, and I wanted to know. I also have 2 young kids, and I just kind of wanted to know, some major kind of takeaways from that book, and if you could kind of share some of the things you found when you were writing this with your colleagues, and especially about it. My interest is in parenting, of course, parenting and working at the same time, but I know that not everyone here has that same interest. But if there's some like key takeaways from the book that you could share, that would be awesome.
Yeah. So the book, basically is organized around the kind of 4 key elements. We have kind of a model for thinking through our lives that, it's like the work, the family, the personal, and the community. elements. And we tried to really think about how what the intersection is between those different areas. And so, one of the things that I was kind of really passionate about, we all kind of took different chapters and then we edited each other's work. But one of the things that I was really passionate a lot when we talked in our circle also was about the guilt that women feel, working hard. Most of us who are in the group travel a lot, like not to easy places. So you're going to Nigeria or Bangladesh or Kazakhstan, and you're taking trips that are a week, 2 weeks, sometimes more. And so guilt is a big part of that. And we're we're all luckily passionate about our work. And so, trying to find that balance. My mother was an entrepreneur, and she was a single mother who would go off, and her passion was sailing. So she would, take us to my dad's for the weekend, and she would go off sailing for the weekend or for the week sometimes. And, so for me, I always saw like our own personal fulfillment and doing what we're passionate about as part of the story we need to tell our kids and inculcate in our kids, so that they can see that, oh, mom's not just going off to a job and why is she doing that and not me, or it's just about the money, but that like we have a purpose, and the purpose includes being a great mom, being a great person in your family, but also your work is contributing to the broader good and the broader purpose. So, with this group that was very focused on this kind of social impact area, that was really important to us to be able to communicate to our children why it's important to do these things that we do, and to whatever we're doing to help people in our day-to-day life, and it could be through volunteering or others, that's valid, and that they need to, and to also share the insides of what we're doing, like the specifics of what we're doing, so that they can see how it actually helps people, like draw that connection between me walking out the door and people whose lives are changing because of it. So that was a big part of it. And we had also some sections on like leadership and the challenges of leadership, and really the importance of knowing your purpose when you're trying to be a better leader. Because we've all of us in the group, when we went back and we had to do a lot of examination, we looked at our careers, and none of us had taken traditional paths. We'd all kind of gone, but in different ways. But what we found was that all of us, even though we had, I've been in a bureaucracy my whole life, and one of my other colleagues pretty much the same, but all of us had like very entrepreneurial stories in terms of how we managed our careers in the organizations, where most of my jobs I've created in the organization. So almost nothing I've done, any move I've made, whether it's lateral or up, existed before I got into that. So I kind of, and it was true when we examined it for my other two colleagues, is that we had to, we kind of found ideas, things that we were passionate about, and found people who were aligned with us to take a bet on those ideas. And that was how, that's how we've created fulfilling careers. So taking that risk, sometimes it wasn't the path that would be most expected or seem the safest. But in the end, like it's led us all to very fulfilling career paths. And it hasn't been the fastest path up, right? So none of us, we all have colleagues who have exceeded our title or, our level in the organization. But that's not what is driving us. So we're all very comfortable with that.
Thank you.
Any other questions?
All right, I have one. Mindy Veale with the Veale Institute. You talked about, and it's pretty well documented, the very teeny tiny percentage of VC funding that goes to women founders and entrepreneurs. You talked about the equity and then the larger percentage, of debt. Have you come across, or do you have any recommendations for how we change that, right? I know there's VCs that are focused specifically, or heavily on trying to invest in women. That's sort of a separate but equal. Do you really see that moving the needle, or is there something else out there we could be doing?
Yeah, I mean, there's a place for like women's funds, like for funds that are just investing in women. So I think that's good. But really, if you're talking about impact, you have to do it with organizations that are general purpose funds. The first thing is getting more women in investment, because we know that women invest twice as much in women-led firms than men do. So that's the first thing, is that we definitely need to try to do everything we can to get more women into these industries, to make the industry more welcoming, incubation systems and accelerators and VCs more welcoming to women. We all know a lot about the culture of these institutions, and how it can really be very, very difficult for women to be leaders in those industries, and to be the ones making the decisions and having control over the money. So, and getting women to lead funds that are not women's funds, right? Women leading general purpose funds. So one of the big challenges is getting first-time fund managers. And so trying to make sure women who have the potential to lead are have a demonstrated track record on specific transactions, so that when it comes time for them to lead a fund, that they are well positioned to get funding, because that is a hurdle that many investors say, we're not going to fund a first-time investor, and that includes our organizations. So that's a big challenge. So that's kind of on the funding supply side. With incubation, what we find is that I guess you guys know, there's a lot of research also in terms of how VCs, interact with women. I think it's getting better because of just awareness that they're more likely to ask women downside questions, so questions about risk in an interview. And then for men, it's more about the potential and the upside. And so what happens is women end up spending all their time talking about all the bad things that could happen. And men are talking about how great they are and how wonderful they are. And generally their projections tend to be more ambitious or inflated, some might say. And so when you actually invest in women, they have more reasonable expectations of growth and whatnot. So getting the right types of questions, helping the investors have that gender awareness of how they might be biased in asking their questions because of the gender of the owner, is really important. I hope you guys are training that out of people as you think about entrepreneurship in your situation. And then on the incubation side, and the training and the capacity building, again, there's a pipeline issue. So if you have all men who are running an incubation or an accelerator, they're sourcing their participants from their networks. I mean, it's natural. They have their own networks. So, you do need to find ways to really make sure you're identifying the potential pipeline that isn't from the usual suspects, because that's the first part of the problem, is that you're just not identifying or open to women entrepreneurs. So we all know that for entrepreneurs to get either into an accelerator, an incubator, or a fund, they need a referral. Referral makes it much, much more likely for them to get either funding or accepted into a program. And so, really being very purposeful about expanding the pipeline of women, that's incredibly important. And then in the incubation and acceleration or training programs, really making sure you're focusing on getting women financing, because it can take a backseat to other things, and the bias is there to have men on that track and women more like, okay, you can go for debt, or you can, just let's build your capacity. A lot of women we hear say we're over mentored, underfunded. And, it's kind of like, oh, you just need more help, but we're not going to give you money. So really trying to change the conversation about that.
Thank you, Wendy.
Thanks.
We have a couple questions from people viewing via LinkedIn. Eileen Frankel asks, can you talk about what you learned about women's leadership versus men's leadership?
Yeah. So one of the things we talk about in the book when we talk about leadership is that, the research, much of the research has shown that kind of the skills of leadership going forward are very aligned with skills that women tend to demonstrate in their management skills. We need, today a lot more work, and that's not everybody, I don't want to be a person who says like all men are this way and all women are this way, but when we see the population at large, these skills of being better at collaboration, being better at kind of articulating the needs of the broader stakeholder group and trying to identify the constraints and barriers for the different groups in these ecosystems is really important. And it's also very important for women to be able to kind of come to the table with confidence. And we of course all know Lean In and these different conversations about women needing to step up to the table. And that's true, but women, we really need to be thinking about how we present at the table and how we do that with confidence, and also making sure that we're letting other women in and bringing them up. So that's a big part of what we talk about, is just having the agency and the willingness to take the risks and also to be authentic. So one of the things we talked a lot about with the pandemic was how it's changed how we bring our face to work, right? So it used to be like, it was like if you had to leave the office early to pick up a kid, you wouldn't really say that was what was happening. You'd kind of sneak out, or you'd, say you had to go to another meeting. And now, we've all seen, I've been on Zoom calls with CEOs who are like, teaching their child to bake, while we're while we're on a call, or people's dogs are in the background. We have a lot more understanding of people's real lives, and bringing that into work, we think, is really important. But it's not just for women to do that. Like, we need to challenge men to do that as well, so that we're all feeling more simpatico with the whole person who's sitting at the table. And I think that's important for all diversity initiatives, right? Is to just make sure we really understand the whole person there, and that we're able to be authentic, that, yeah, we have all these different parts of our lives, and I'm not just compartmentalizing work into its own box.
Perfect, thank you. Evelyn from LinkedIn as well has asked a question. Could you please share some more details on your career path with us?
Yeah, so I started my career, I graduated from college and in 1990. So I actually went to the Soviet Union to just be there when it was kind of collapsing. And I found a job teaching English, and, managed to insinuate myself into a cool program that was setting up an MBA program in Western Ukraine. And I worked there for about a year when the Ukraine became independent. And IFC came into Ukraine, which is the private sector arm of the World Bank, to help with the privatization program there. And they asked me to help them. I helped them. We privatized most of the small business sector in Ukraine. We worked in like 30 countries around Ukraine. Obviously, it's just devastating to see the names of all those cities popping up in the news, every day now. And I spent 3 years working with IFC in Ukraine, helping with the privatization there, and then also Belarus. So I supported Belarus also. After that, I went back to grad school. So I did that out of college. And it was just a lucky, it was a risk I took to go to Ukraine, but it was, an amazing opportunity. And then I came back to Johns Hopkins School of Advanced International Studies and Wharton. I did the joint degree program there. And I worked at a couple of places while I was in school, but essentially I decided I wanted to come back to the bank group. I came back to the World Bank to a privatization program in the World Bank, but eventually ended up back at IFC, and I've spent my career mainly at IFC. So the cool thing about working in an organization like IFC and now the bank is that you can, like, you can have a really diverse career in doing a lot of different things, but in the same organization. And so I've done capacity building work. We have a huge advisory program advising banks, governments, other private sector players on how to improve access to finance or skills. I've done that. I've done the investment side, which is actually investing in financial institutions to get money out the door with loans and equity. I've done blended finance, which is trying to find a way to marry the public sector funding and the private sector funding. And I've also done change management. I worked on kind of a corporate job for 4 or 5 years, helping restructure the whole corporation, decentralize it, put in place new processes and procedures and new skill competencies, things like that. So, I've been able to do, and now I'm running this big global program. You're able to do a lot of different things in an organization like this. And that's been one of the really fulfilling aspects of my career.
I have a question. Hi, Wendy, this is Laura. I'm from Brazil, and from your experience with developing countries, do you think, are there any differences between the challenges that women faces in developing countries, or it's the same?
I mean, broadly it's the same, but the specifics differ from region to region or from country to country. But even within country, you see such huge variation that, there's some parts of Latin America that look a lot more like Asia and some that look more like Africa, just in terms of their technology adoption, their level of education, things like that. So I would say there's variations everywhere. I wouldn't say it breaks down always regionally. Our programs in Latin America do, though, have a much bigger technology focus. So we're doing a lot more to help STEM entrepreneurs, mainly through the Inter-American Development Bank, and to get more like procurement out the door for women entrepreneurs, but largely focused in the STEM industry. So I think, technology adoption there is really a critical issue. And this ecosystems are probably a bit better generally, but we're working in tough places like Honduras, and, we don't really, I don't think we even have a project in Brazil. IFC did projects, for years we've been doing projects, with banks in Brazil on gender. So they've been one of the earlier adopters of some of the gender programs that we've done, but even preceding WIFI. So.
Awesome. We have a few more moments here. If there's one more question, I'll leave a couple seconds for people to put those in the chat. You have one?
Well, I believe she wanted to go.
Yeah, you can, absolutely. Yeah.
Hi, Wendy.
Please introduce yourself also.
Okay, my name is Mabel Zhuang. I'm a small business owner, so I'm a woman entrepreneur.
Congratulations.
Thank you. And also currently, I'm also an EMBA student at the Case Western Reserve University. And I was very much attracted by your topic, like parenting and surviving. So could you share with us how you, it's kind of an old question, balance your work with your family? And also, could you also share us with some success stories for the women entrepreneurs you have supported from the World Bank?
Yeah. So the balance issue, I mean, one of the things we talk about in the book is about the importance of checking in regularly on balance, because it changes. It can change really rapidly, and one way of balancing things, for 1 6-month period is totally different, especially as your children grow. It can be really different what's needed. And so in my career, I mentioned I worked in a change management program for 5 years, which coincided with when my kids were little. And that change management program, it was amazing because it gave me access to the top leadership in the organization. It helped me really understand how the organization worked, how it functioned, who was who, and understand change management and how things change or don't change. So it gave me a lot of lessons about leadership, but I didn't have to travel as much. So I wasn't out, in the field. And, some people might have seen it as like, oh, if you want to progress, you should be a deal jockey and just go up, every year in that chain. But this was like an amazing opportunity for me that, I really enjoyed and really fit with the cycle that I was in my life at the time. Now, I mentioned my son is in college. I have 2 girls who are going to be going to college in a couple of years. So I'm really, and COVID was, of course, a totally different situation. So now, each of these times you have to really be mindful and, step back and say, like, what is this going to look like for the next 6 months or for the next year when this is the pattern I have in my life? And, when kids are little, like one of the things I remember my sister telling me that I thought was really different from what I always heard was, actually, when your kids are really little, if you have help and you can have a nanny helping you, or you can, they can be in school, you might want to think about that instead of, and take time off when they're older, because, when they're 10, they have a lot of needs also, but by then you've kind of gotten back to your job and everything. So I think also not thinking like, oh, everything, I get this time off now, but when are times when you want to actually take 6 months maybe, or take a different, have a totally different approach to flex work. And the nice thing is right now, a lot of that is more available to us, right? I mean, people are more aware of this, the working from home. When I started, we had to create a flex work toolkit at IFC because nobody even knew what flex work was or how to do it. And I did that with a women's network that I was in at IFC. I helped create that flex work toolkit. Now it's like the Bible for everybody who's doing flex work at the World Bank. So, I mean, obviously it's evolved in those 10 years, but it's become like a very important, critical business path. So that's kind of I think a big part of the balance is taking stock. Obviously, having a support network in your life is critical. And I have a spouse, my husband, he works from home. So he is able to handle a lot more of the stuff at home, which is amazing. But if you need, I have a friend who gets home helpers and she has people come in twice a week to her kids are not young, but just to help with all of the things that need to get done around the house if you don't have the time or the wherewithal to do that. So it could be in-laws, it could be parents, but, ask for help, you need help. That's the main, that was one of the main takeaways, is that you have to find your own ways to getting help. I'll give you one example of an entrepreneur that we helped through WeFi, because the second part of your question was about the entrepreneurs. For many years, the World Bank has been helping Nigeria set up credit bureaus and credit infrastructure and collateral infrastructure so that you can have loans that are not based on fixed assets. And that's a big problem for women because most women don't own their houses or they don't own them outright. And they don't have other forms of collateral. So collateral is a huge bottleneck for women entrepreneurs. So we've been putting in place this infrastructure for some time, and under WeFi, we started partnering with a bank and a development bank in Nigeria to develop a new product that did not use collateral. It used some inventory, but also credit history. And when COVID hit, the product was about to get launched, but everybody went into lockdown. So they were able to convert it very quickly into a digital product where women could apply online and get the loan without ever having to step into the office. And within the first 6 months of WeFi, we were able to get 1,200 women businesses funding through that program. And we recently had a woman come and speak who had received funding under that program. She's a baker. She started out, I think maybe like a year before the pandemic, with 5 employees. The pandemic hit and it was incredibly difficult to keep supply chains going, but she was able to continue to build her business, including building out a network of distributors who are all women. And she was able to grow her business until now she has, I think, something like 500 employees and 200 women in this distribution network. And then during COVID, she also got hit, or after COVID, or however you want to set the timing, because she's a baker, the war in Ukraine created all these disruptions and a huge spikes in the price for wheat. And so she had to work through that, and she did that with the bank that had developed this product, that she was taking advantage of. So she really attributes, her success, not just her success, but her very survival on being able to access these funds in like the middle of the downturn. So that was really inspiring on the one hand, and it also gave us a lot of insights into like the real myriad of challenges these women entrepreneurs are facing right now.
It's an excellent story.
Thank you. It looks like we have 2 more questions from people joining via Zoom, and then we'll wrap the discussion up. Marina, if you'd like to unmute yourself and ask your question.
Thank you so much. And thank you, Wendy, for coming on. My question is, how or what characteristics do you look for in either the entrepreneurs or the projects to decide how you will invest?
So I'm several layers away from the investment because I give the money to the implementing partners, and then they usually work with funds, accelerators, or incubators who will all have their own criteria, right? So we don't have like a specific, we have a criteria that we're working with small growth businesses. And so either if they're existing businesses, we look for firms that have 5 and above employees. But if they're startups, they need to be growth startups, right? So we're not going to fund we don't do microfinance really, in the sense that it's, just funding stable, very, very small companies. So that's our main, that's our broad criteria for our programs. So yeah, the individual programs will be very different. I mean, there has been some work on psychometric testing, like are there psychological characteristics that make entrepreneurs more likely to succeed, or or on the opposite side, to not repay loans on the lending side. There's some testing on that the World Bank is doing. I don't, it's not like it's not a big part of what we do. Other than that, I think we're just trying to make sure that whatever criteria are being applied by funds, that there's not an unintentional bias in them against women. You test that both by looking at what they are, but also looking at the outcomes, so if you're saying, if you have 20 women coming into the pipeline and 20 men, and only 1 woman gets through and gets financing, and all the men do or half the men do, then there's something not working in the system.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. Suzanne, did you have a question before we wrap things up?
Yes, hi, I'm Suzanne Brady-Kelney. I'm a faculty member here at the School of Medicine. I have been for 28 years now, and I also have a biotech startup company. And we certainly have suffered from some of the things you mentioned earlier. It's been very hard to get investment because it's a woman-owned business. And it's not only that, but it's also difficult to get investment in the Midwest. So, what you might be able to do in Silicon Valley, you can't do here. And so we've sort of suffered from that. And I wondered if you had any additional advice, because I know you're dealing with a lot of, underserved populations, what some strategies might be to overcome those barriers.
So, I mean, we only work in developing countries, I don't know if you're asking about like as individuals getting funding or more the ecosystem. I mean, one of the things we do try to do in countries is try to build up the whole ecosystem. And I know that's a challenge outside of the major cities in the US is, there's not as much of an entrepreneurial ecosystem, meaning, the funders aren't there, the knowledge of the local markets isn't there, and the network effect of entrepreneurs working together and, innovating and linking into others is not there. So certainly at the more macro level, trying to attract that kind of an those kinds of ecosystem partners to play off of each other and to benefit from each other, I think could be really helpful. And then for women entrepreneurs that are pitching, we have programs that are training women entrepreneurs to recognize the bias that they're facing and to counteract that, right? So if you're being interviewed and you keep getting the negatives, how do you spin that into your positives? And how do you make sure that you're being really evaluated in terms of your upside and not just, them looking at the downside risk? So really trying to unpack those biases are pretty important. And it's important, we want the investors to be aware of it, but until they're all aware and changing their behavior, the entrepreneurs need to also be aware and try to make sure that they're they're not falling into those, they're not taking the bait on those things. Mhm.
Great. Well, Wendy, thank you so much for your time today. We really appreciate it. Thank you to everyone who asked some great questions and led to some insightful discussion. And I'll hand it back over to Michael.
Great. Thank you, Erin, for doing such a great job moderating. Thank you for everybody for joining. Wendy, it's awesome to see you. Thanks for taking a few minutes to share. We'd love to have you in Cleveland sometime. So when the snow melts, we'll nicer time to visit, but thank you for taking the time.
Thanks so much for having me. It was really fun talking to all of you.
Cool. Just two mentions of upcoming programs we have on Thursday also at noon Eastern time. Carrington Cole from L'Oreal is going to be talking about the foundations of work in the beauty industry. And then on Monday, January 30th, Mike Fisher, who's an alum of Weatherhead, who just recently stepped back from the CTO role at Etsy, is going to talk about my new favorite topic, Chat GPT. We're talking to Chat GPT or not Chat GPT. So Mike's going to reflect on his experience at Etsy, and should be a fun conversation. That'll be Monday at noon Eastern. So until then, thank you everybody for joining, and we will see you soon.